Hello everybody, welcome to Centre 33's Understanding and Managing Anxiety Part 2. Let's start with a quick recap of what anxiety is, what keeps anxiety going, examine some strategies to reduce anxiety, and finally have a little look at getting support. So to start off with, a brief recap of what anxiety is. Those who have watched part 1 with my colleague Ollie will have heard about the fight, flight or freeze response, or the 3 Fs, which is another term for the body's anxiety response. Anxiety is a very natural, evolutionary safety response. It's designed to protect us from threat or danger. As part of that protection, it causes changes in the way we feel, think, and behave. Now, while it's designed to be helpful, for some people, this response can become activated at times when there isn't a real threat, or when the threat isn't as great as our brains perceive. This is when anxiety can become more problematic. If we look at the equation at the bottom right of the page, you can see how anxiety can be formulated as our perception of threat over our feeling of being able to cope. It's very often the case that people who have anxiety have an increased perception of threat and a decreased feeling of being able to cope. And what we want to do when helping somebody to manage and reduce their anxiety is to change those arrows around. Let's have a little look at what keeps anxiety going. Now, how people respond to us when we're feeling anxious can affect us and can contribute to the continuation of anxiety. So that's going to be the first of our bubbles. If people respond by becoming upset or frustrated with us, then this may make us feel even more anxious. Conversely, if people fall into the trap of overly reassuring us that things are going to be okay, then this could also keep anxiety going, as we may become dependent upon that reassurance and not feel able to cope in situations without it. The environment's important. Ongoing stress or problems in our daily life and environment can also keep problematic anxiety going. If these problems are out of control or we're unable to find solutions to them, then the anxiety and stress associated with these problems may well continue. And finally, if we turn to the 2 internal factors, patterns can sometimes develop in our behaviours and thoughts which can maintain and sustain anxiety long term. As mentioned, anxiety can often cause us to escape or avoid certain situations, things, or places. That's what we're thinking about when we look at our behaviours. Whilst in the short term, this may seem helpful because by avoiding those things, our anxiety response is unlikely to be triggered. In the long term, this behaviour might be keeping our anxiety going, as we never really have an opportunity to challenge our fears and worries. As long as we avoid something, our brain is likely to continue to think about that thing as a threat that needs to be responded to. We're going to introduce a strategy in a moment which helps people to overcome anxiety by reducing avoidance. Thoughts are very important too here. The way we think about things has a great impact on how we feel in situations. Anxiety can cause us to develop certain ways of thinking about things, which result in us overestimating dangers and underestimating our ability to cope. For as long as our brains jump to focusing on the negatives or predicting the worst, our brains are likely to continue to misread these situations as threats and continue to trigger our anxiety response. This slide shows an example of an anxious cycle in which someone's thought patterns and behaviours are keeping their anxiety going. If you listened to part 1 last week, you will have seen my colleague talk through the same slide. So this fictional person has an event coming up where they're going to meet new people, be exposed to new groups of people, lots of things going on. If they have thoughts about going into this event, such as, I'm rubbish at making good first impressions, no one's going to like me, I'm going to be alone and miserable, their brains might misinterpret that situation as a threat. So activate their 3F response, bringing on unpleasant physical sensations and feelings such as they may feel nervous, jittery, slightly sick. Then, having these worrying thoughts and very unpleasant feelings, this may understandably affect how this person behaves at the moment. So this person might keep themselves to themselves, might avoid contacts with people and conversations. As long as this person has those kind of thoughts about themselves and what's going to happen in that event, they're likely to get those anxious feelings. And for as long as they engage in those behaviours, they're likely to continue to have those views about social events and about their abilities to cope. If we avoid doing the things that make us feel anxious, we never get the chance to see what actually happens and learn new information to hopefully challenge those worries. So as you can see from the diagram, the anxious cycle is quite likely here to continue. So with this unhelpful cycle in mind, what can we actually do to reduce our anxiety? Well, going back to the equation, what can help to reduce anxiety is reducing our perception of threat and increasing our feelings of being able to cope. Next, I'm going to explain a strategy which research has identified as being one of the most effective ways to overcome anxiety. This strategy focuses on changing anxious behaviours. So in this strategy, we're focusing on avoidance as the main factor keeping anxiety going. One of the most effective ways to overcome anxiety is by overcoming avoidance. The idea behind the strategy is to encourage ourselves to go back into situations we're avoiding in a manageable and gradual way. Doing this allows our body to habituate or get used to the situation, and hopefully by doing that, learn new information from it, which will challenge our worries. So the diagram you can see on screen shows how this works. On the left-hand side, we have the strength or intensity of anxiety. Along the bottom is time. If you look at the top curve, time 1, this is the first time we go into a situation. It's how we feel fear and our anxiety is likely to increase quite high and take quite a long time to come down again. But the more we repeatedly go into the situation, time 2, time 3, time 4, the less high or strong our anxiety should get each time. The quicker it should come down again. The more we do this, the more we get used to the situation, and the less our 3F response is triggered, the better and more comfortable we feel in that situation. So what I'm going to do now is talk you through planning the strategy using a fictional example. And the first thing we want to do is to identify an avoided situation. The example we're going to use is a person who feels very anxious about going into town with anyone other than their sister, especially by themselves. This is something they often avoid doing. The first thing we need to do is to identify the goal. So this person would like to be able to go into town with friends more often, and their ultimate goal is to spend 40 minutes in town by themselves. Then we want to ask ourselves, how can we work towards this goal in a gradual and manageable way? This person has created some steps and ordered those steps so that they start off doing something which is only slightly anxiety provoking and gradually work their way up to more anxiety provoking situations. And then to their gradual goal, up to their ultimate goal. So for this person, start off with something that isn't that challenging. They go into town with their sister and a friend. So they're comfortable with their sister, they've got an extra person there, 20 minutes. By the middle of the step plan, they're going into town just with their friend. And that friend is leaving them alone to shop for a few minutes. So it's created so that each step of the way introduces them to a slightly higher level thing that they've been avoiding. It can help to think about what variables you can change when creating steps. In this example, we're changing length of time, also who's going to town with the person. Other variables they could change would be the type of shop, what time of day they went into town, or where they would go. So, once we have the plan, we work our way through each step at a pace that is manageable for us. Plan each step in turn, have a go at the step, and only move on to the next step when you're able to do the one before, when you feel you've gotten used to it and you no longer find it an anxiety-provoking situation. Once you've completed a step, it's really important to reflect on how it went. Asking yourself and making a note of 3 questions, these 3 questions on screen, can be really helpful. What did I worry would happen? What actually happened? What can I learn from this going forward? Hopefully, what we learn in situations is either that our worries don't come true, or if we did experience some level of stress in the situation, it wasn't quite as bad as we had predicted. We were able to cope with it, perhaps better than we predicted. So in this example, this pretend person worried that they'll get lost and not be able to cope and have a panic attack. What actually happened was that they thought they were lost, so they had a few shaky moments. They did feel a bit panicky, but they were able to cope with it. It wasn't a full-on panic attack. And what they learned from it was that they feel that they're lost, they can just stay there, keep looking, they'll find the right place. And they can also feel a certain level of panicky feeling, but not have a full-on panic attack. Another way to reflect on how steps went is to draw a graph like the one on screen, showing how your anxiety changed over the course of trying this step. This can also help you to visualize how your anxiety changes over time. Hopefully, you'll see a pattern a bit like the first graph I showed you with the curves on it, which each time you do a step, your anxiety doesn't get quite as high as the last time. If you need to repeat a step a few times before moving on to the next one, we would actually encourage this. And this is very, very normal. It's also fine if you find that in practice, a step is too hard. You need to go back and repeat the previous one a few times. Perhaps even create a new step sort of in between two existing steps. What I'm hoping to demonstrate on this slide is how somebody can change an unhelpful cycle of anxiety into a more helpful pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. On the left, with the orange boxes, we have the previous anxious cycle I talked through, where the person's thoughts and behaviours were helping to keep their anxiety about social situations going. On the right, in the blue boxes, we can see that by changing our behaviours, by gently encouraging ourselves to reduce avoiding situations, we're likely to learn new information to help us challenge our worries. And we're therefore more likely to feel less anxious and uncomfortable in those situations, making it more likely for us to feel able to do it again the next time. As we previously discussed, as well as affecting our behaviours and feelings, anxiety can also affect the way that we think about things. We might find that we have developed certain thinking styles in which we predict bad things are going to happen, or think negatively about ourselves. This is very common for people with anxiety. Research has identified some common types of thinking style, which we often refer to as thinking traps. On screen here, we have some of the most common ones with examples. Catastrophizing, which is when thinking about the worst thing that could possibly happen. Fortune telling, predicts terrible things that are going to happen, we can't possibly know. All or nothing thinking. So if you don't get the A grade, if your exam isn't worth anything, you failed completely. Mind reading, pretending that you can understand what's going on in people's heads, what they're thinking about you. Overgeneralizing, imagining that the small unfortunate thing that's happened to you that day is a part of a pattern that covers your entire life. Filtering, so dwelling on the one negative or two negative aspects of a particular situation rather than all the other things that happened. Labeling, so describing yourself and thinking about yourself as a negative in negative terms. While behavioural strategies like the step-by-step plan can help us to learn new information to challenge our worries, another approach is to focus on the worries directly. The first step is to make a list of common worries that you have, then to identify whether any of them may be thinking traps. And what we want to do is to question whether or not the worry is definitely true or definitely going to happen. Anxiety can have the annoying effect of making worries seem like they're facts, when actually we can't know this for certain. So once we have a list of our worries, we need to go through them in turn and question or challenge them to help us come to a more balanced view of the situation. You can ask yourself questions such as the one on this slide to help you challenge your worries. So you're worried about a situation, what's the worst that can happen? Am I 100% sure that what I'm worried about is going to happen? Is it worth spending that amount of energy on? Am I confusing possibility with certainty? On the slide here, we have some examples of thought challenging. The alternative thought you come up with doesn't have to be the complete opposite or something that is really, really, really positive. In fact, if it was super positive, it might make it harder for us to believe. But hopefully, through challenging the worry, you'll be able to come up with an alternative that is perhaps more balanced and realistic. So if you have this worry, they haven't replied to my message, that must mean that I've done something wrong and now they hate me. Well, just try and balance it out. Well, there's probably other reasons they haven't replied. They could be busy, they could need time to themselves. Weigh your worry up against real likelihood. Once you challenge some of your common worries, then looking back on the list of alternative views, look back on the list of alternative views as often as possible. So you can keep, if they're common worries, you can keep a list of alternative views on them handy. You can always look back through them when you do have that worry. So the last strategy I'd like to talk to you about is problem solving. Problem solving can be another way to address things that might be causing us to feel anxious. This might be useful if the thing that's causing you anxiety is being kept going by external factors, or if a more practical solution is needed. So say, for example, that you're falling behind with history because you find the subject really, really hard. So you're feeling very anxious about the exam that you have coming up. After identifying what the problem is, the first step to problem solving is to come up with a list of possible solutions. When thinking of solutions and strengthening our problem solving mind, be a completist. It's more fun to include any and all possibilities, no matter how realistic they are. So for this problem, I might come up with a list of possible solutions, such as try to catch up with the subject myself, ask my teacher for help catching up and understanding the content, tell my dad that I'm struggling, not bother revising, stop going to history lessons, make a revision plan, breaking the topic into smaller sections and work through them one at a time, ask my friends to go through the content together. Now remember, at this stage we're including all solutions, whether or not we think they would work or even be a good idea. Now we need to weigh up each solution and think about the reasons for and against it. Go through the list and ask yourself whether each solution is possible to do, and what kind of outcome is likely from it. So, not bother revising, we take that one. Is it possible? Yes, technically. What is the advantage of that? Well, wouldn't have to go through the difficulty of catching up, yes. Against it, very clearly, the exam would be even harder and I'd feel even more anxious. Probably be annoyed with myself afterwards. Same with stop going to history lessons, you could see that that has some downsides. When you're weighing up ask my teacher for help, against it you may have something like a big cross at me for falling behind. So you still have kind of anxious thoughts that are factored in there. So hopefully once you've gone through each solution like this, it will become clear which one or ones it might be worth trying. Once you've chosen your solution, a couple of solutions, it might be helpful to plan how and when you're going to try them out. So this person might choose to speak to their teacher for help and plan to do this on a Wednesday lunchtime before the lesson. They might also break the topic down into smaller sections and plan to create a revision schedule on Wednesday evening after speaking to their teacher. So you can combine solutions. We wanted to finish the talk today by thinking about support networks and who you could reach out to for support if you needed to. Speaking to other people can be incredibly helpful, whether it's for advice, a listening ear, a distraction, or just some company. Think about who in your life you can currently talk to and about what, and also think about anyone you could reach out to or start talking to when you need more urgent help, support, or advice. That can include family, religious groups, community groups, support services. Professionals and support services that you could reach out to include the pastoral or wellbeing team at your school, college or university, your teachers or tutors, the GP. It's often overlooked. They're not just there for your physical health. Kooth, which is an online service providing mental health information, tips and support. The Mix, which is an online service providing support for young people about mental health and other wellbeing topics. Young Minds is a website with information specifically about young people's mental health. Anxiety UK, it's a national charity providing support specifically around anxiety. Keep Your Head, a local website with information around mental health and wellbeing. And we may be a bit partial, but you could also reach out to us at Centre 33, whether it's for a one-off chat about something, or whether you're looking for just general advice. The range of services that we can help you with mental health, housing, employment, money, sexual health, young carers. We are open Monday to Friday, 12 PM to 5 PM, or Saturdays 10 to 1 PM. You can leave us a message outside those times. You can call, text, or WhatsApp, or email us. We also have drop-ins open around the county. They're at different times, so you can check our website for that. If you ever need mental health support urgently or in a crisis, it's really important that you reach out to someone for help. In an emergency, say call 999. There is also the first response service, 111. People think 111 is just for physical injuries again. If you call 111 and call up and select option 2, that takes you through to emergency care. So we have the Samaritans, Childline. It's a host of organisations there that will help you. Okay, so I hope this talk has been helped you, and that you have a bit more of an understanding about anxiety, how you can better cope with anxiety-provoking situations. Please do look in on the Centre 33 website when you get a chance, and give us a call or an email if you think we need any help. Thank you again.